All right, everybody, and once again, it's time for Off the Top Sportscast. I'm John, and that is Roy, and we're here for another wonderful edition. Roy, I believe you have our topic today.
Yes, the off the top topic of the day is a really a looking
Mhm.
back in time of a time when we were young and someone who influenced us in a very aspect of the sport, of this particular sport. And we're going to reminisce, going back and talking about our grandmother.
Okay.
And our grandmother influenced us because she liked her, she called it lucha libre or
Yeah.
wrestling. So we're going to talk about some wrestling, maybe some characters we remember in our wrestling, maybe some influential characters that we say now. Um, so what if you were to go back your first wrestler of memory, as far back as you can go, what would be your one of your wrestlers?
Well, our grandmother loved wrestling, and I would sneak into the living room when I was way supposed to be asleep for school, and I would watch with her. And one of the guys that I loved from the beginning, it was Jimmy Superfly Snuka.
Hmm.
And he would do and jump off the rope. And he was the first guy that I saw really utilize the ring with speed and jumping off the ropes and flying through the air. So Jimmy Superfly Snuka for me was a big part of my childhood.
Interesting. I thought, if you were to put down you know, wrestlers, he would be one that I would comment that I saw.
Mhm.
If you didn't. One that I kind of thought was polarizing. There was one weird one, and but one was polarizing. Is again in mine younger is the Iron Sheik.
Yeah.
You know, he was the hated, the shoes with the point, the
Yes.
whole Iron Sheik look. So I would say if I go way back as I can remember, the Iron Sheik was a polarizing figure. That American hatred,
Mhm.
kind of American against that. So the Iron Sheik, that would be one. Then I'll go
You
back.
know, it's funny you say the Iron Sheik because the Iron Sheik had a with a lot of wrestlers, has a reputation of being such a good guy out of the ring. Totally opposite of the guy that I just said. Snuka had a horrible reputation outside the ring, horrible accusations all over the place. The possibility that he actually killed his wife is real. Um, and so uh, just the juxtaposition of those two that we just happened to pick randomly is quite interesting. Um, I was also a big G.I. Joe fan when I was young. So when Sergeant Slaughter came out, and it was my action figure come to life. I mean, it was incredible how much he just looked like him with the big old jaw and everything. So uh, I loved Sergeant Slaughter, even though he wasn't a great wrestler. He wasn't that fun to watch. He just kind of beat people up, but um, that was just the coolest to see. Hey, this is a real guy, and I'm actually can play with.
No, that's a good one. If again, I'm going way back. I don't even
Mhm.
know what year, this guy fit in. Um, but I'm going way back. Um, One that was psycho, weird, drooled, didn't really talk, moaned, hairy, and that was George the Animal Steel. That
Yes.
was one that you were like, and he had nothing of a wrestler body, just was a hairy, scary looking, bald guy. That again, when I was young, I'm just like, he's like, doing those noises. You're like,
Mhm.
what the heck is this wrong with this guy? He was
Yeah,
biting people, drooling. So that was another impactful one.
yeah. And that's one of those guys that grandma loved.
Mm.
Grandma loved George the Animal Steel. She would tell me about him all the time. Um, and one guy who had to captivate you, he was just like nobody else, and that was Andre the Giant. And I don't know who has more legendary stories about him that might be true, might not be true. It's either between Bo Jackson and Andre the Giant. They have all these like different stories and different you know folklore about them.
I think Hulk Hogan has some of the most awkward stories about him when you
Yeah,
listen to some of the interviews. And Hulk, they would say Andre the Giant's really kind of a crazy party womanizer kind of person. And you would just go, what? But they said there's some crazy stories with him and women and stuff like that. So yeah, again, but when you talk about polarizing, he was Andre the Giant.
I mean he was the phenom, and we can't talk about wrestling without talking about Hulk Hogan. He was the king of wrestling. I mean, he was everywhere. He was in movies. He was, I went from eating Flintstone vitamins one day to eating the WWE Hulk Hogan vitamins, shaped like the wrestlers. So, uh, he was probably the most impactful wrestler you would have to say of all time.
All time, all time. He made the company. He put the company on their back. He went from good to bad to good. He was every. Remember him? He almost. I can't remember that he had the black beard or he just
Yeah,
colored in the back.
NWO era.
Yeah, and it just you know another one. Never was the status of Hulk Hogan, but legendary. Ric Flair. You know,
Oh yeah.
you talk about people walk like him,
Hmm.
woo, doing that. That's legendary. You know what I mean? His capes that he used to wear, it just that's another guy that you say you think wrestling, you think Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Ric Flair. They're just wrestling and you think of that individual. What's another person that if you say wrestling, you think of that?
Man, I'd have to say, if you're going 80s and 90s, Macho Man Randy Savage is one of those guys.
Yeah, man. That you talk about a guy, he put his hands out, and he
Hmm.
starts and you had the fringes. This is a
Yeah,
guy that they made his outfits and he was just unique. Yeah,
and
I would say.
and there was already always been storylines, but for me, that was the first time that there was a love angle storyline with him and Miss Elizabeth, and they get married in WrestleMania, and you're like, this is insane, and they're really married, and they got married at WrestleMania, and then they came and they started doing this like weird love triangle thing, and it was the first time that real dramatics happened in my that I can remember, that the storyline almost became bigger than the who was wrestling who. You know what I mean? It was, what's going to happen next with this storyline.
So now who made in wrestling the toothpick cool?
Oh, Razor Ramon.
Razor Ramon. That's one guy that had a toothpick always in his mark. That's a guy. Did he have much? He had a vest,
Hmm.
nothing. But
Nothing.
the razor with the hair greased back he always had that was the only thing the guy had was a toothpick, and he
Yeah.
made that the biggest thing ever. Razor Ramon, big guy
Well,
too.
yeah, and you think about it, he wasn't the greatest wrestler or technician or doing moves that you go, oh, I just remember that. But what he was a talker, and he had that charisma, and it comes down to that in wrestling a lot of times. You either have the guys who are doing these crazy, crazy acrobatic things, or you have a guy that's just so polarizing. And one of the guys that coming kind of more into the new era when I started watching a different type of wrestling, which was WCW. And the guy who grabbed me right away was Sting.
Oh,
Sting,
yeah.
the beach blonde hair when he first started, and the face paint. And Sting was one of those guys that he was an okay talker, but he let his wrestling moves and flying off of things and jumping backwards and doing all this kind of stuff that was really crazy and athletic. And I understand that this is entertainment, but nobody can say that these guys are not athletes.
Oh, yeah.
um you know there's a certain amount of things you can fake. I can pull a punch, which just means I'm still punching you. I'm just not connecting all the way. But a punch is a punch, and if I'm chopping you across the chest and I see your chest get red, you, those are not, those are chops. Somebody's actually slapping you, you know what I mean?
Trust.
Picking you and, just slamming you. I think people think because they see the wrestlers bounce. I don't think people know how hard a wrestling ring is. It doesn't really, it has a little bit of give, but it's not so much give like a trampoline. You know what I mean?
You're not on pillows.
No,
Okay.
no.
Who's another guy? This is a guy who kind of when he came into he got my attention where you watched a little bit because of him, you know? And he was you know, one that again, kind of the Razor Ramon simple, but he was the manly man
Hmm.
wrestler. And we go, oh yeah. He would come across, have a can of beer, you know what I
Oh,
mean? Steve Austin.
yeah.
That was a guy who kind of drew my attention a little bit back just because he was just a no frills, rugged kind of guy. You know what I mean? And he did some other things outside of wrestling, some little TV shows and stuff like that in the sense of um, competition shows and all that. But
Mhm.
that was a guy that, you just liked him. He was the all American, kind of this feel of he's everybody's person. You know what I mean? He didn't have
Yes.
a niche that he felt he was just, this is me. I'm a wrestler, but I'm just a regular guy. That's kind of came across.
Yeah. No, and he comes across like that in real life. I mean, he has a very popular podcast that he does. He has his own beer line. And he was the one of the first um, anti-heroes.
Hmm.
He was a bad guy because he wasn't a good guy. He wasn't, the baby face good guy, but you rooted for him, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that era of Steve Austin, Stone Cold, and The Rock was a great era. I mean, it was wrestling had started to dwindle a little bit, started to go down a little bit, and those two guys coming in at the same time and bringing wrestling up and being both of them were the anti-heroes. Rock started off a bad guy, then he went to a good guy, and they were it was pretty impressive how those guys really held wrestling together for decade, a decade, you know?
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If you were to say, give you names, uh,
Hmm.
The Rock,
Hmm.
John Cena,
Yeah.
which one of those, and there's a lot of other wrestlers, but which one of those two you say became the modern Hulk Hogan?
Yeah. Um, both of them are really, really popular. Both of them reached heights in popularity in wrestling that you're right. Hulk Hogan, Rock, Cena, Ric Flair, like you said, those guys were, You know, I will say that The Rock has his hand in so many pies, and Cena held on to wrestling more than The Rock did. Um, I think that The Rock is the most successful wrestler of all time, if you think about it.
100%. Agree.
You know, he went into movies, he went into alcohol, he's done
Football.
every genre, and
Yeah.
now he's in football. You know, every genre of movie, not just movies, kids movies, adult movies, action movies, comedies. I mean, cartoons. It's really incredible what he's been able to do.
I think when you look at John Cena, Batista,
Mhm.
Stone Cold, The Rock, and some others out there. Never to this scale, but let's just say all of them. They all should thank and maybe give some money to Hulk Hogan because he opened the door to allow people to say, man, let's monetize these guys' popularity, put them in movies, get them into other avenues.
Mhm.
Um, and even then, still Hulk Hogan was, but he wasn't always, just making money. He was struggling.
Right.
To compare to what these guys are making today. So when you think of John Cena and uh, The Rock is superseded everybody, is the biggest man on campus, but they all should bend their knee to Hulk Hogan because if it wasn't for him, I don't think there'll be anybody who'd be making the money and loosen the purse strings of McMahon to say, hey, we got something good, but we got to pay these guys. Because again, these guys were struggling,
Yeah.
trying to make ends meet. And he's
Yeah.
allowed them to really make some money. So when it comes to wrestling, Rock is number one. He's on the top of the mountain. But they all owe it to Hulk Hogan. He's the man.
No, for sure. For sure. And I think is so interesting is that Cena, The Rock, and Batista, who are the three biggest kind of movie stars slash wrestlers out there right now, they all have their own lane. You know what I mean? They're not constantly kind of colliding with each other, or they all kind of do things differently. And I enjoy it. I enjoy it all. I enjoyed Batista's movie, Stuber, was very funny. And the stories from that movie set was so funny because a lot of people go, "Oh man, he didn't know how to be a star because he was so nice to everybody on set." They were like, "This is not how stars act," and he remembers the struggle, like you said. So the stories were that I think for a rap gift on the movie, he gave everybody, and I mean everybody, gifts, and they were individualized and personalized to them because he had gotten to talk to everybody and to know them enough to buy them individual gifts that they would love, which is, it's unheard of. It's unheard of. You
Yeah.
know, one thing that we haven't talked about as far as wrestling goes, and I feel like it was bigger when I was younger. Big thing was tag teams.
Mm, yeah.
And tag teams, I think it's ego, you know, but you just don't see that anymore. And when I was young, the tag team that just it was the Legion of Doom, and they had the big football pads with the spikes. Um, one of those guys, his son actually ended up being a linebacker for the Rams, Leonidas, for a while, and pretty good pro for probably 6, 7 years. So, I don't know if they're as big now, but uh, they were huge back in the day.
Yeah. Tag teams were big. Um, way back. It was old one was in can they had the Indian garb and all that Chief Strongbone. He came in with the whole headdress and would do his dance. That was like the big tag teams. Yeah, now I really don't know any tag teams that I would go, oh yeah, this has been a tag team, the Hardy Boys, maybe, but
Mhm.
there's none that I would really go, this is a epitome. What there was one I'm trying to remember was Booker T. Washington. Was he on a
Oh
tag?
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
They were. Well, there was three of them, but there were tag team in there. Booker T and
I don't remember his name. I
Ray
see the face.
Ray. I think Ray Dudley. Yeah. And then you had the Bushwhackers. You remember the Bushwhackers?
Oh yeah.
They were a big character. Um, and I'll tell you what, for me as a kid, wrestling had the best toys. They had the best toys. I mean, they had
That's
the hard rubber figures that I actually have one. I actually bought one like a year ago or so, or maybe not, maybe a little later, or sooner than that. But I went to this little shop and they just had one, and he's in rough shape and everything. But I bought it because it was so nostalgic. Um, and I don't know if a lot of people they would say, how did you even play with this? It was a rubber figure, and they were like in a fixed pose, not very, they wouldn't move. But you could like bounce them. That was their thing, that you could like drop them and if you dropped them on their toes, they'd bounce forward. I don't know. I loved it. Um, I remember in New York, I got in trouble because I dropped one on the mailman from the fifth floor.
what figure did you drop on him?
I want to say it was Hulk Hogan.
But
Yeah.
yeah, all those figurines at those time were like that. You had the remember Skeletor and I think it was He-Man. All those came
Mhm.
like looked like wrestlers. You had the wrestling figures. So when you were a kid, you had a lot of these figurines. They were all really, if they were to distort your image of human beings, those were the toys because they were all ripped and shredded,
Yeah.
muscular figurines.
Yeah. Um, and as time has progressed, I'll tell you something else. Uh, the video games are a huge part of the wrestling industry.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know, I
I listen. My game. It was a karate game. You know what I mean? That they would come up and you just could do certain kick, punch, swoop. It was yeah, really kung fu. I think it was just called kung fu. It was limited.
yeah,
Then the biggest game again that was in this wrestling, Mortal Kombat, that like became movies and all that. That was big. Of
well,
one.
I have for Nintendo, I have it, and it's WrestleMania,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Jay and I have played it, and it was 2D, you know, and it's funny to play it now, and I'll tell you something, and I hope people out there get the chance to do this. Just go and find the music from that old wrestling game, because playing it was fun when I got it, but the music took me it literally transported me, you know, and so one thing I want to say is that the music in wrestling was very important. The entrance music, right? When you heard that this is a real American, and you knew Hulk Hogan was coming out,
Oh man,
you
yeah.
know, and you would hear the dun dun, and it would be uh, uh, Macho Man coming out, dun, 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 um, and all these different when you would hear The Rock come out,
Yeah.
um, Stone Cold with the glass breaking, um,
Cena.
they- yeah, that's right.
It's true. You bring that up. I didn't even think about it so much. You hear the music, everybody goes crazy.
Yeah,
They know
and
who's coming.
it's so you said it yourself. You're like, I'm not. You weren't really a wrestler fan that you paid attention to it hardcore, you'd just catch it, right? But if I started to play music for you, you'd start smiling and you would go, "Oh yeah, that's this guy. That's Million Dollar Man, Ted DiBiase." When you hear the remember? And then he would come out, Um, you know, the music is a huge part of wrestling, folklore, and having a good entrance music, um, just as important as having a good, stage presence.
Yeah, it's true. I think wrestling has gone, again, it opened up the way for so many other industries. You know, at one point you could say, well, they still are. Kids wanted to be wrestlers.
Oh yeah,
That was the profession. I'm going to be a wrestler. Even wrestlers who were real wrestlers got into Kurt Angle
that's right.
became wrestlers.
Hmm.
And was again, a very popular wrestler,
Exactly.
you know? So again, you look at those guys and you go, wow, how time has changed. And they're still in the industry, technically. They're still
Hmm.
influencers in the market. That was the first influencers, you can say, ever before the internet influencers. They were the
Absolutely. Yeah. And wrestling has also changed every type of uh, genre, like you were saying. TV. They changed how sports were put on TV. They knew the importance of getting out to an audience. They knew the importance of making a big deal, a production. The production of everything was huge. Music before the matches and before WrestleMania. These, football wasn't doing that before. Baseball wasn't doing that before. Basketball wasn't doing that before. Wrestling showed them that you could have an athletic event and make it an event to come see. You know what I mean?
100%.
Before that, boxing was drawing, big crowds and it was an event, but that was more of an event because if, back in the day, if you didn't see it, you missed it,
Yeah, and
you
you
know?
think about it, couple things. They were they were the storylines. Now they always, oh, this person against this person, that team, and here's the storyline. They painted the storyline. They made the narrative. You bought into that narrative. People fight a fake, real, whatever. They were the soap operas of TV for young kids around the world.
Mm,
And you think about this, when you think of starting something, really women in that kind of a fighting sport, they were the pioneers of that. The
hmm.
pioneers,
Oh yeah,
and these women are just as athletic,
a great
as
movie.
these guys.
Yeah. If you ever want to catch something really interesting, it's on Hulu and it is The Dark Side of the Ring. And it is all the crazy stories, all the craziness that happened, real life stories that happened. Uh, and I'll tell you, they're so compelling that my wife doesn't care anything about wrestling. And I put it on, and she'll sit there and watch an episode and go, "Oh my God, that was crazy." Um, so right now, one of the biggest movies out there is a wrestling movie. You know, so it's incredible how far it's come. Now they're not just the wrestlers making movies; we're making movies about the wrestlers.
Mhm.
So we've come full circle, full circle. They are every aspect of entertainment right
Awesome. Well, we talked a lot about wrestling, reminiscing forward and back in regards to wrestling and how really impactful. And again, I think you're right. If you talk to anybody who's not even in wrestling, they know a wrestler. They know the wrestling moves. They know the signature songs or words or names of these wrestlers. And they don't have to be a wrestling fan. But you're talking about wrestling that is filling out stadiums, football stadiums. So again, hey, maybe you have out there some memories, childhood memories. Share with us. Hit the like button, comment, Tell us your favorite wrestler. We might not think of one,
Yeah.
thought of it, but because there's a lot of them. There's some, you talk about legends of the sport. We didn't even talk about what type of wrestling, the craziness. I used to remember the cage matches and the battle royales. Everybody's in the ring. There's a lot of
ECW.
crazy.
Yeah.
The barbed
ECW.
wire, crazy.
Yeah. ECW was very big, and it was here in Orlando. So I got to go, once or twice. It was so hectic for me. I couldn't handle it. But ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate everything. Like he said, please put it in the comments, because let me tell you something. Just hearing the names and getting to think about them, it just makes me smile and puts me in a good mood. And that's what entertainment is supposed to do. You're supposed to think back and love it. And please hit the like, please hit the subscribe. We're so close to one of our goals. Live at 25. We're gonna go live.
Live at 25, baby. We're gonna go live on 25, and we're gonna let you know. We're gonna set it up before we go
Absolutely.
live, so that because we want people. We're gonna comment to you guys. We're gonna have friends. We may have a whole screen on this platform to have different people.
With some of our subscribers. So
Yeah, let's talk about sports off the top. Just talk about topics. You're gonna start seeing people that we're gonna invite in, talk about their sport, what they know about, some of the comments, and you, the subscriber, may be one of those people. So listen, subscribe. 25, live at 25. We looking forward to it. But again, as always, we appreciate you. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. And as always, when it comes to sports,
talk to a stranger about sports today.
thank you guys. We appreciate you.